There are stories so old, they feel less like words and more like echoes. Whispers carried on the wind, slipping between the cracks of time, brushing against our skin before we even know they're there. The Book of Enoch is one of those stories. It's not the polished tale you'd expect from Scripture. It doesn't come with the comfort of parables, neatly tied with moral lessons. No, the Book of Enoch is something different, something older, something raw. It's the voice of a man standing on the threshold between heaven and earth, his feet still muddy from the fields, his eyes wide with terror and wonder at the things he's seen. It's a story both ancient and unsettling, a tale not just written, but carried, passed hand to hand, whispered over fires, hidden in caves, guarded by the faithful, and feared by those who thought it better left buried. It speaks of angels who didn't stay in their place, of giants born from forbidden unions, of knowledge poured into human hands like water from a broken jar. Too much, too fast, too soon. And at the heart of it all stands Enoch, a man so ordinary he could have been any of us, until heaven itself reached down, took his hand, and pulled him into the sky. Most of us will never read it. It's not in our Bibles. It's not read from pulpits or carved into stained glass. Yet, for centuries, the Book of Enoch has refused to die. It's outlived empires and whispered its way through generations, surviving in fragments, tucked into ancient libraries, carried in the hearts of exiles and dreamers. Something about it calls to us still, not as doctrine but as a question, a riddle left in the earth like a shard of broken pottery. What did Enoch see? Why was his story set aside? And why does it still pull at the edges of our understanding, as if daring us to look up? There's something almost poetic about how the Book of Enoch came back to us, not through scholars in polished libraries, but through the calloused hands of a Bedouin shepherd chasing a goat. The year was 1947, and the desert near the Dead Sea stretched wide and silent beneath a heavy sky. Somewhere out there, on a slope of limestone and silence, a young man named Muhammad Evdib stumbled after a stray goat. One goat, lost among the rocks. Frustration gnawed at him as the sun leaned low, casting long shadows across the desert floor. In the fading light, he came to the mouth of a narrow cave, dark and yawning, carved by time itself into the bones of the earth. What made him throw a stone inside that cave, no one knows. Was it curiosity? A child's defiance of the dark? Whatever it was, the sound of shattering clay echoed back, a sound that would ripple across history. What he found inside wasn't treasure, not in the way the world defines it. Rows of ancient jars, brittle and cracked, lined the cave's belly. Inside, scrolls, wrapped in linen, preserved by air so dry it might have been the breath of time itself. Scrolls that crumbled at the edges when touched, their ink faded, their language half lost. Among them were fragments of the Book of Enoch, words unseen for nearly 2,000 years, written in the flowing script of ancient Aramaic, the tongue of prophets, exiles, and dreamers. But these scrolls weren't alone. Over the years that followed, archaeologists uncovered 11 caves at Qumran, each one holding fragments of the human story, scripture, rules, warnings, and visions. Texts stretching back to somewhere between 250 BCE and 68 CE. And in those fragile scraps, over 20 fragments of the Book of Enoch, each piece like a shattered window looking into a world long buried. But the Dead Sea Scrolls only gave us a whisper, a taste. The fullest version of Enoch's story wasn't found in those caves at all. It lived thousands of miles away, high in the mountains of Ethiopia, where the ancient Ethiopian Orthodox Church had preserved the book in full, written in Guizi, the language of saints and scholars, a language older than empires. For them, it was never a lost book. It was scripture, holy, alive, a voice that had never stopped speaking. That's what stays with me. This wasn't a book dug up once and forgotten. It was a book people carried, copied, cherished, and risked everything to protect. A book that mattered so much it survived exile, conquest, and the slow decay of time. It makes me wonder, when something refuses to die, when a story keeps pushing through the cracks of history, maybe it's not just a story. Maybe it's a voice still calling us back, if we're willing to listen. Tucked away in Genesis 5, Enoch's name might seem like little more than a passing footnote, a name on a family tree stretching between Adam and Noah, a link in the fragile chain of life after Eden. Enoch walked with God. Then he was not, for God took him. That's all it says. No long prophecy, no dramatic farewell speech. Just a quiet disappearance, swallowed by heaven itself. But that silence, that absence, feels louder than any proclamation. It leaves a space wide enough for wonder to slip in. What kind of man walks so closely with God that the line between earth and heaven simply dissolves beneath his feet? What does it mean to be taken? Did he die? Did his body crumble into dust? Or was he lifted into the sky, heart still beating, breath still warm in his chest? The Bible doesn't say. It leaves us standing at the edge of that mystery, staring up at the sky, wondering. It's the book of Enoch that dares to fill in the silence, to reach into that blank space and pull back a story, one that stretches from earth to the heavens, from the first sunrise to the last judgment. It doesn't show Enoch as a king or a warrior, but as something far more relatable. A man, a father, a farmer who worked the earth with his hands, who knew the ache of tired bones and the weight of everyday worries. But in the quiet, in the stillness between chores, Enoch saw things. Glimpses of something beyond the veil, flashes of light and shadow dancing at the edges of the world. He wasn't born special. There's no prophecy announcing his arrival, no angel declaring his destiny. He was just Enoch, until the day the watcher's eyes turned downward, and the heavens opened to let him in. The book of Enoch tells us that angels came to him, not with gentle greetings, but with urgency, pulling him upward, far beyond the clouds, into a sky crowded with stars and secrets. They showed him things no human eyes were meant to see. The machinery of creation grinding beneath reality, the places where light was born and shadows were chained. They called him scribe, a title heavy with responsibility. It was his job to write down what he saw, not for himself, but for us. For the ones who would come after, stumbling in the dark, wondering if there was anyone watching, anyone listening. Enoch's story is written not like a diary, but like a conversation across time. One man's desperate attempt to hand us a lantern before the darkness swallowed him whole. The book of Enoch isn't neat. It doesn't fit comfortably between Psalms and Proverbs. It's wild, fragmented, part vision, part warning, part love letter to a world that never stops looking up. It's split into 5 pieces, like the bones of a skeleton pieced back together after centuries underground. There's the book of the Watchers, where angels fall and giants rise. There's the astronomical book, where the stars themselves whisper secrets. The book of Dreams, where history folds into prophecy. The epistle of Enoch, his final plea to anyone willing to listen. And scattered between them all is something even more fragile. His legacy, not in temples or cities, but in words scratched on fragile parchment, carried across generations like smuggled treasure. Some stories feel ancient. Others feel old enough to be dangerous, like they weren't meant for human hands, but somehow we found them anyway. The Book of the Watchers, the first section of the Book of Enoch, feels like that. It doesn't unfold like scripture. It hits like a warning, like the frantic whisper of someone who's seen too much and knows the ground you're standing on is far thinner than you think. This part, chapters 1 through 36, is where the sky starts to crack. It begins with something that almost sounds beautiful. 200 angels, the Watchers, sent down from heaven to watch over humanity. Not to rule, not to interfere, just to observe, to bear witness as we stumbled our way through the dirt and the dawn of time. Their leader's name was Samiaza, and at first, they stayed where they belonged, watching from above, silent and unseen. But watching is dangerous. The more they looked, the harder it became to stay apart. They saw the women, beautiful in their fragility, vibrant with life, so human it made them ache in ways they didn't understand. What started as fascination twisted into something deeper, desire. They didn't want to just watch anymore. They wanted to touch, to taste, to belong. So they fell, not in a single catastrophic plunge, but step by step, crossing the line between heaven and earth until there was no way back. They took human wives, laid down in human beds, and from those forbidden unions came the Nephilim, children born too big, too strong, too hungry for a world too small to hold them. Giants, monsters, tyrants with appetites no harvest could ever fill. Genesis 6 mentions them, a passing line about the sons of God and the daughters of men, about giants roaming the earth in those days. But Enoch doesn't skim over them. He stares directly into their faces. These weren't just giants. They were a corruption, a collision between heaven and earth that never should have happened. Beings caught between two worlds, too big for either one. But the Nephilim weren't the only gift the Watchers gave. They came with secrets, knowledge never meant for human hands. Azazel taught the art of forging weapons, turning Earth's quiet metals into tools for war and slaughter. Others taught the movement of the stars, the cutting of roots, the secrets of enchantments and charms. Even the art of cosmetics, painting faces with Earth's pigments. A strange, fragile rebellion against the inevitability of death. It sounds almost poetic. Angels sharing forbidden wisdom, giants walking beneath ancient skies. But Enoch doesn't tell it like poetry. He tells it like a crime scene. Every gift came with a price. The earth groaned beneath the weight of their hunger. Crops withered. Blood soaked the soil. The Nephilim turned against creation itself, devouring not just animals but humans, and eventually each other. The heavens took notice. God sent Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel not as messengers but as executioners. Samyaza and his followers were dragged down, not to death but to something worse. Chained beneath the mountains, in the dark heart of the earth, they were left to wait. Not for rescue, but for the final judgment, when even the rocks above them would break and expose them to the fury of the one they betrayed. And the Nephilim? Drowned, swallowed whole when the flood came, washing the earth clean in a storm of water and regret. There's something humbling about standing beneath the night sky, that silent canopy stretched over us like a mystery we were never meant to solve. It makes you feel small, and for most of us, that smallness is where it ends. A quiet sense of wonder, a fleeting reminder that there's more out there than we can touch. But Enoch didn't just wonder. He was pulled upward, lifted by angels, far above the fields where he once walked, higher than the tallest mountain, until he stood at the edge of heaven itself, staring into the machinery of the universe. What he saw wasn't just beauty, it was order. The sun didn't just rise. It moved through gates, unseen thresholds at the ends of the earth, marking out the days, the seasons, the years with a precision so perfect it made human timekeeping look like a child scratching lines in the dirt. The moon followed its own path, weaving between light and shadow in rhythms Enoch hadn't known existed. Even the stars had laws, fixed courses set by the hand of God himself. No wandering, no rebellion. Enoch saw it all, and then he was told to write it down. Not just for kings or priests, but for us, ordinary people, stumbling through the dust of a world that feels chaotic and broken, forgetting that above us, the sky keeps its rhythm, unshaken by our confusion. The astronomical book, chapters 72 to 82, is Enoch's attempt to hand us that rhythm, to pull back the veil and show us that the heavens are not silent. They speak. Every dawn, every sunset, every shift of light to dark is a reminder that creation hums with purpose. The angels showed him the length of the year, 364 days, not 365, a calendar woven into the bones of creation itself. They showed him the names of the winds, the paths of the stars, the hidden gates where light enters and leaves. It wasn't just knowledge, it was defiance. In Enoch's day, and even later, in the days of the people who treasured his words at Qumran. The priests in Jerusalem followed a different calendar, one tied to the phases of the moon. Their festivals, their offerings, even their sense of sacred time flowed from that lunar cycle. But the people who clung to Enoch's visions, the ones who copied his words and hid them in the desert, they followed the sun. They kept a calendar rooted not in human tradition, but in the very movements Enoch saw written across the sky. To them, it wasn't a preference. It was obedience to the order God himself had set. In the quiet pages of the astronomical book, there's something gentler, a reminder that even when the world feels like it's spinning out of control, there's a rhythm underneath it all. A rhythm older than empires, older than sin, older than fear. A rhythm written not by kings or priests, but by the hand that set the stars in place. A rhythm Enoch saw, and one he's still trying to show us, if we can slow down long enough to listen. Some visions arrive like lightning, sudden, blinding, impossible to ignore. Others creep in like mist, curling through cracks in the mind, unfolding slowly, dream by dream, until you can't quite tell where the dreams end and the truth begins. The Book of Dreams, the third section of the Book of Enoch, feels like that. It's not one dream, but many visions layered on top of each other, as if Enoch's mind had become a window, and history itself kept pressing its face against the glass. By the time we reach this part of Enoch's story, chapters 83 to 90, he's no longer the wide-eyed man being pulled into the sky for the first time. He's older now, worn down. There's a weight to him, the kind that comes from knowing too much, from seeing not just the future, but the pieces of it that no one can stop. He doesn't keep these dreams to himself. He tells them to his son, Methuselah. The first dream is one of flood and destruction. Enoch sees the earth drowning under a sea not just of water, but of judgment. The echoes of the watcher's sin washing over every field, every village, every life. The sky weeps, the ground splits open, and when the water finally pulls back, the world it leaves behind is a scarred and silent thing. It's not just a dream of death. It's a memory of something coming, a warning whispered long before Noah ever built his ark. But it's the second dream, the animal apocalypse, they call it, that stays with me the most. In this vision, history itself becomes a living thing, played out not in words or battles, but in the forms of animals. Enoch watches the story of his people unfold like a living parable. The children of Israel are sheep, their enemies wolves, lions, eagles, ravens, and wild beasts. Each nation, each kingdom, each power that rises against them is given a shape, a set of teeth, a hunger that drives them. It's a brutal, violent dream. Sheep torn apart, blood staining the earth, flocks scattered to the wind. Enoch sees it all, from the ancient kingdoms to the future empires that hadn't yet been born in his day. Egypt, Babylon, Assyria, Rome. All of them tearing at the flock, their jaws snapping, their wings blotting out the sun. But even here, even in the carnage, there's a thread of hope. At the end of the dream, a white bull appears, bright and unbroken, standing where the wolves once ruled. Some say it's a messianic figure, the promise of a shepherd who would come, not to lead from afar, but to stand among the sheep, to bleed with them, to fight for them. It's a strange, beautiful image, this glimpse of rescue shining through so much loss. The Book of Dreams, it's not just prophecy. It's grief wrapped in foresight, a father trying to warn his son about storms that hadn't yet formed, about enemies whose faces hadn't yet appeared. It's a map scrawled in symbols, handed down through time, not just to explain the past, but to help us recognize the patterns when they come again. Because they always do. The wolves are never gone for long. Every generation learns that the hard way. And yet, through all the blood and dust, Enoch keeps dreaming. Not because he enjoys the visions, but because somewhere in all the wreckage, there's a promise, a reminder that the story doesn't end with the wolves. The sheep survive, the white bull arrives, and no matter how many times the sky darkens, the light has always known how to break through. There's something different about the Epistle of Enoch. The visions, the prophecies, the cosmic journeys, they all carried a certain wonder, a sense that Enoch was standing between worlds, trying to take it all in. But here, in these final chapters, chapters 91 to 108, the wonder gives way to something sharper, heavier. Desperation. This isn't a story anymore. It's a plea. A man standing on the edge of something so vast and terrifying that even his words can't contain it, trying to shout back a warning before the silence swallows him whole. This is Enoch's voice, not as a prophet on a mountaintop, but as a father, a neighbor, a man who's seen too much and loves too deeply to stay silent. The epistle isn't poetry. It's a storm at the edge of language. Enoch lays it all bare, the fate of the wicked, the reward of the righteous, the judgment coming like a tide no one can hold back. Fire, chains, the weight of every hidden sin dragging souls into the dark. It's not subtle. It's not meant to be. This is the voice of a man who's run out of time, speaking to a world on the brink. And yet, beneath the thunder, there's something gentler too, a whisper not of doom, but of hope. For the ones who refuse to bend, who hold on when everything around them is collapsing, Enoch promises that they are seen. Their tears are counted, their silence is heard, and when the weight of injustice feels unbearable, there's a day coming when everything hidden will be dragged into the light. This is what strikes me most about Enoch's final words. They're not just prophecy, they're personal. You can hear it in the way he speaks, in the cracks between the warnings, in the moments where he's less a prophet and more a father speaking to his children. He's not cold, detached, delivering pronouncements from a distant God. He cares about the earth, about the ordinary people caught in the crossfire, about the ones who will never be kings or prophets but who will suffer all the same. Enoch's warnings hit hard, but they're never cruel. Even when he talks about the destruction of the wicked, there's no gloating, no satisfaction. There's only grief, the sorrow of someone who's seen what could have been, and how far we've fallen from it. That's the heart of the epistle, the weight of wasted potential. Humanity was given so much, a world in perfect balance, a place where heaven and earth could almost touch. But we reached too far, too fast, until the sky itself recoiled. And now Enoch stands at the edge, looking back, knowing there's no going back to Eden, but maybe, just maybe, there's still a way forward. He speaks to the generations that will come after him, to us, warning that every step matters, that even in a world broken by sin and sorrow, there's still a path worth walking, that every choice pulls us closer to the light or deeper into the dark, that the sky is still watching. Enoch disappeared, but his story refused to die. For someone who's mentioned so briefly in Genesis, a man who walked with God and was gone, his shadow stretches across more history than most kings and prophets combined. His name lingers not just in Scripture, but in the spaces between Scripture, in the stories whispered after the temple lamps were snuffed out, in the margins of texts scribbled by hands too restless to leave questions unanswered. Enoch's voice didn't vanish when he did. It splintered. It slipped into the hands of prophets, scribes, and exiles, each of them catching glimpses of the same vision, each of them trying to hold onto the edges of something too vast to name. In the book of parables, found in the Ethiopian texts but missing from the Dead Sea Scrolls, Enoch's story took a turn that stopped me cold the first time I read it. There, in the heart of this ancient vision, Enoch sees a figure, the Son of Man, sitting beside God, judging the earth. It's a figure that sounds so much like the one Jesus would later describe. A judge, a redeemer, a bridge between heaven and earth, that it's almost impossible to separate them. Was Enoch seeing something centuries ahead of his time? Was he glimpsing the shape of something God always planned, even before the flood washed the world clean? Or did later voices, trying to make sense of Enoch's fragments, layer their own hope into the text, blending prophecy with memory until the two became impossible to tell apart? Scholars still argue, but the tension remains, a whisper of something divine, reaching beyond the limits of one lifetime. But Enoch's legacy isn't just buried in ancient texts. It's woven into the DNA of belief itself. When Jude, the brother of Jesus, quotes Enoch directly, calling him a prophet who saw the Lord coming with 10,000 holy ones, it's not just a reference. It's a recognition, an acknowledgement that whatever Enoch saw, it mattered enough to echo forward, carried not just in the memory of a few, but into the very heart of the Christian story. Even Peter, standing at the threshold of the New Testament, talks about angels bound in chains, locked in darkness, waiting for judgment. That's not from Genesis. That's Enoch's story. His visions bled into the early church, whispered their way into sermons, shaped the edges of theology even when the book itself was left out of canon. But nowhere did Enoch's legacy take root more deeply than in Ethiopia, where the Ethiopian Orthodox Church declared the book of Enoch Holy Scripture, not folklore, not apocrypha, but a living, breathing voice of God. While the West let it fade into obscurity, Ethiopia held it close, preserving the words of this ancient wanderer like a family heirloom, passed from hand to hand, heart to heart. To them, Enoch was never just a prophet. He was proof that heaven listens, that heaven speaks, and that heaven sometimes lifts ordinary men off the earth and into its very heart. Even outside the church, Enoch's fingerprints remain. In the folktales of old rabbis, you hear his story, a man so righteous that God couldn't bear to leave him in a broken world. In the whispers of Kabbalists, tracing the secret movements of angels and stars, his name appears like a key no one can quite fit into the lock. And even today, in movies, books, conspiracy theories about ancient giants and fallen angels, Enoch's story keeps resurfacing, like a fragment of some primordial memory that humanity just can't shake. Enoch isn't just a figure from history, he's a question about how much of the divine we're meant to see, about what happens when ordinary people, farmers, fathers, wanderers, catch a glimpse of something so big it cracks their mind open. A question about whether the sky is still watching us, if there are still watchers at the edges of our world, or if we're completely alone down here, left with only the echoes of a man who walked with God and never came back. Enoch's story reminds us that faith doesn't always come in neat packages. Sometimes it comes in whispers, fragments of something we're not meant to fully understand, handed down like smuggled treasure, begging us not to forget. Because maybe Enoch didn't write for his generation. Maybe he wrote for the ones who would come after, for the ones who would feel that same tug, that same restless hunger to look up and ask, is anyone there? Maybe his legacy isn't just words on a page. Maybe it's the very act of wondering, and that wonder is a legacy no flood, no empire, no silence has ever been able to drown. The Book of Enoch isn't just a story. It's a voice that somehow slipped through the cracks of time, through floods and wars, through silence and exile, until it landed here, in our hands, fragile and worn, but still breathing. It's a story of angels and giants, stars and secrets, warnings whispered in the dark by a man who never came back down. But it's also more than that. It's a story about us, about the hunger to know what's out there, the fear of what happens when the heavens answer, and the fragile line between faith and fear, knowledge and ruin. It's a reminder that the human story has always been bigger than what we can see, and that somewhere, just beyond the sky, there are still watchers watching. This is Whispers of Heaven, and I'm grateful you sat with me, felt this old story breathe again, and let the silence between the words speak to something in you. If Enoch's voice stirred something in you, even if it's just a question you can't shake, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next whisper we follow. Until next time, may you hear the whispers of heaven, and may they find you ready to listen.